Oh, you do?
That's what I understand. It's like, okay.
Thank you.
It's like the first no, I just make friends with you in the hotel. Outside.
Tuesday, she said, let's stay. You're the only one who can answer math questions. It's like, I'm sorry? Yes. That's one of us.
It's usually my son took it as sophomore. There's usually a lot of freshmen and sophomores.
That's, at least this is what she's telling me. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yes, this was
And one is dark.
No, lunch is not.
Lunch is not like that.
Quite been done all day.
Yes.
Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. If we could please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and welcome to the September 11th business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. I just want to note for the record that Mr. DeGrego is absent due to illness, and there's a typo on the agenda under number 5 policies C. The correct number is 5131.7, so everybody just make a note of that. It's correct on the paperwork, it's just wrong on the agenda. And we'll move on to student reports. Jonathan Law is first this month. Are you all by your lonesome?
Yeah, I'm alone tonight.
Blind
Shauna's
solo.
at the volleyball game.
Okay.
She's the captain, I think, so she went to that. So we get started. In academics, Law is currently having our college visits throughout the year for upperclassmen to meet potential future schools and learn more about colleges in the area. This month alone, there are 24 colleges visiting, including Fairfield U, Lasalle College, Quinnipiac, and UMass Amherst. Just today, we had 30 students attend a visit by UConn, and many more are registered to go for the future visits coming to Law. Last week, we had our freshman welcome program at Law with a presentation and tours from groups of seniors. This was a part of Law's Freshman Academy and activities that helped the freshmen get accustomed to the high school. Let's see, in athletics, the first Law volleyball game is tonight against Foreign at Law, and the proceeds of the game are going to a fundraiser for Texas schools affected by Hurricane Harvey. This Friday is the opener game for football at Law versus Bethel. There will also be a pep rally at Law this Friday for the fall season sports, and it will be Black and Gold Day for the rally. Everyone wears black and gold. Let's see. In activities, recently Law had their car wash fundraiser last Saturday, September 9th, to raise money in remembrance of victims from 9/11. And coming up on Wednesday, October 4th, Law will be visiting Harborside School, and Friday, October 6th, West Shore, in order to introduce the current 8th graders to Jonathan Law and give a presentation of what's to come if they attend Law in the upcoming years. In upcoming Law Amazing events, there will be a fundraiser at Eli's Tavern September 24th, run by the Jonathan Law Music Department. And tomorrow at 6 p.m. will be the back-to-school night for freshman parents and parents new to Law. They will start with a presentation by Mr. Thompson at 6 p.m. and then follow their students' daily schedule starting around 6:30 in order to meet their students' teachers and learn their daily routine.
Great.
That's about it for Law.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Anybody here from Foreign tonight? Are they all at the volleyball game?
So,
Okay, I guess we'll forego the Foreign report and they can catch up with it next month. Public comment. Is there anybody here this evening who'd like to address the board for public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll forego the public comment statement. Chair's report, I just want to remind the board that we do have a workshop next Monday at 7 p.m. It will be at 7 p.m. We're going to begin talking about targets for the priorities and goals that we adopted in the spring of 2016. We will have a visitor from the State Department of Education who will be speaking to us about how the state, how he develops their targets. That's his role at the State Department of Education, so I'm looking forward to hearing from him. And I just do want to reinforce for the board, we have on tonight's agenda the first reading of the proposed 2018-19 budget priorities and assumptions. So just a reminder that these are the documents that will guide administration as they develop their proposed budget that will come before the board in January. So that's the purpose of those. And with that said, are there any liaison reports? Okay, none. I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser then.
Thank you, Mrs. Quentin. Good evening, members of the board. I'm going to begin, believe it or not, we're into our third week of school. It's astounding how quickly everything starts to fly by. So but I'd like to backtrack a little and just spend a little bit of time just giving you a report on how it has gone. You may have heard yourself, but there was just so much that has occurred in preparation for opening school and since school opened, and just thought we would highlight some pieces. So I just want to tell you that from everything that we heard, we had an extremely smooth opening, and there were lots of changes, so it was great to know that everything went smooth. For example, at the elementary level, all the elementary schools now are all starting at the same time, which is the first time in, I was going to say a dozen or more years, but it may be longer than that, I don't know. So, but that went off without a hitch. We opened on the 28th with a little more than 57,050 kids. You know, that enrollment still continues to fluctuate. You know, we'll have the official enrollment for October 1, which is when we have to submit it to the state. Of course, the one exception was West Shore Middle School did not open on the 28th. It opened on the 31st. But I will say that the opening at West Shore went extremely smoothly as well. And the only thing that I want to underscore is we cannot begin to thank the myriad of people who enabled the schools, all the schools, to open on time. No one, unless you're in the buildings day in and day out, has a clue as to what goes on to get those buildings ready. One of the comments that I have heard, I would say no fewer than 20 times since the start of the school year, was how good the buildings looked. Somebody said they were spit shine, somebody else said they were sparkling clean. It was, and that's just a tribute to our maintenance and our custodial staff, classrooms ready, which is a real tribute to them, but also to our classroom teachers, et cetera. And of course, at West Shore, a Herculean task on the part of all the custodians, the maintenance people, Pat Bradbury leading all of them, but also the staff at West Shore, who went out of their way to get everything ready in their classrooms, as well as the administration, Paul Cabana, Ken Hayes. I mean, we just couldn't have asked for more. Many of the board members, many of you were there for the walkthrough on Tuesday night, a day and a half before school opened, and it opened on Thursday, and they are underway. They are underway, so it's great. Personnel, I'm pleased to tell you, I can't remember a year that we made a back to school report. We have one teaching position in the district that has not yet been filled. So that's it, and that includes, we had to hire 2 social studies teachers a week ago, and we were able to do that, and they're already beginning, I believe. Is that correct?
One already started, one starts tomorrow.
Okay, great. In special education, we have a new Housatonic Milford Public School collaborative program, which has just been launched. We're really excited about this program. This is a program for students to participate in what's called a supportive college experience before they graduate high school. So approximately 10 of our students will be able to participate in this program at Housatonic. This is a course that's co-taught by a instructor at Housatonic, as well as one of our special education teachers. And for these students, they'll learn the layout of Housatonic, they'll learn how to advocate for themselves, they'll be able to kind of manage and maneuver in the Library Media Center, and also find support services, learn how to kind of manage themselves, and all of this is while they're still in high school, and then next year we'll be able to go into Housatonic and actually step into one or more classes. Both Housatonic and we are just really excited about this program. We just think it's going to be a wonderful bridge for a number of kids who may not have had that opportunity. And, you know, we always worry about kids leaving the public school system and not having the supports in place. Well, here's this, again, this bridge for kids. So we're really excited. We also want to let you know that this is the third year that almost every single special education program has remained in place in their buildings. If you remember when we went through the reconfiguration, we committed to trying to keep kids that their program would remain in their school for the entire length of the school, those years that the school represented. So pre-K through, or K through 5 or 6 through 8, et cetera. And we've really been able to maintain that, I would say 98% of the time, which is really good. We have a new pre-K class at Pumpkin, which we shared with you, and that's up and rolling, and it's going very well. Again, this is with respect to special education. And we're also delighted that we were able to bring 3 of our out-of-district placed students back to Milford. So these kids are at their home, at home. They're back in the Milford Public Schools, which we're really thrilled about. Just a few things under instruction. The second career pathway, entrepreneurship and business management, is underway. It's launched. We saw some of the new furniture. This was before all the classrooms were set up, but I know that the teachers are excited about it. We also had 14 of our teachers participate in 4 days of performance-based assessment work in collaboration with teachers from Amity as well as Stratford. They worked for 4 days, and then they're going to be working for another 4 or 6 days throughout the year, is it?
They'll work 2 more days during the school year and then an additional 4 days next
summer. And I cannot tell you how excited the teachers are with the learning that they engaged in. They're already taking some of their learning and applying it in their classrooms and starting to pull in other staff members, et cetera. So we're very excited about that. You should be proud because you supported this. The East Shore Language Lab is up and running, which they were the last middle school to receive the new lab. So teachers and kids are really excited. We also are pleased to share that there is a new honors humanities course at the high school. This is a interdisciplinary team-taught or co-taught class of social studies and English, and we're very excited to be offering that. In operations, a number of things. Transportation, which is always the nemesis of Mr. Riccitelli before school opens. Extremely smooth. There were only minor adjustments that were needed, and again, this was with the idea of the times changing. Times changed at the middle school by 10 minutes, but at the elementary, much more significantly, and went off again without a hitch. We transport, just so to refresh people's memories, to 14 Milford Public Schools, 3 parochial schools in the community, and 3 technical vocational schools. And the latter, that's required by law. You're going to hear more about the transportation when Mr. Riccitelli does his October report, but you should know that we are currently transporting 4,000 students daily. We have 62 buses and vans that are transporting kids, and there are approximately 120 regular education bus runs and 1,000 bus stops. In addition, we have in special education transportation for a number of our students, and some of that is for out-of-district placement, and some of it is for in-district placement as well. And the collaboration between Durham and the school system has just been marvelous. It's a great partnership. Under facilities, again, kudos to Pat Bradbury and his entire team. Just so you know, new roofs have been almost completed in 4 schools: Live Oaks, John F. Kennedy, Meadowside, and Orange Avenue. They were substantially completed by the start of the school year, and any of the final work that has to be completed, there's no interruption to the classes at all. Some other projects, all building windows were replaced at Harborside. If you see it from a distance, you may not notice the difference, but when you walk up to that school and see those new windows, and then if you're inside classrooms, what an incredible difference. Jonathan Law, the emergency generator project, which we've spoken about several times, has been completed. Also, the student parking lot was paved, and another abatement project on the 2nd floor was completed. Kennedy School, the all-purpose room, the new ceiling and lighting. Orange Avenue, the media center and main office replaced their carpet and tile. Matheson, the main office replaced floor tile. Foreign, the security booth, the glass was changed to fortified glass, now required by law if we're making renovations to a school or building a new school. And we're in the process of doing that for every one of the buildings. Meadowside replaced cubbies and sinks in the art room and the main office. Cath Penn, the abatement, replacement of 5 classroom hallways of VCT, so new tiles in those hallways. West Shore, the renovation project, which is underway. We also re-groomed infield playing areas at all of the elementary schools, and 2 out of 3 of the middle schools. West Shore will be done when the renovation is completed. And we installed approximately 140 portable air conditioning units to accommodate students and staff with medical needs. Security upgrades, the quick link and area of refuge devices have been upgraded. So we now made sure that all of our emergency communication devices of all of our buildings, we double checked them to make sure they're all in place, and again, some of those have been upgraded. With respect to radios, our district-wide emergency radio channel is being tested weekly in conjunction with the Milford Police and Fire Department. Over the summer, all of the radios were checked to make sure that they were in working condition. If they required new batteries, etc., they were inspected, so that, because every one of the schools rely on those so much. And an example is in West Shore, where we don't necessarily yet have the new phones in every one of the classrooms. Teachers have those radios, and that's their means of communicating. We have begun annual school safety and security training. All the administrators went through it. Parsons, I think, has had the training. Most of the people in the buildings, because they do it via a video, and they have to sign off on that. And the training will continue. We have first aid CPR training. We are offering that to all school employees, and believe it or not, so far 60 people, employees from several different buildings, have taken advantage of this free program. So we have that many more people in the buildings that are trained in CPR, which is wonderful. Additional cameras have been installed. There is another, it just came through a week ago, I think, another state security grant. So we're looking into wanting to apply for that. If we were to pursue it and we were to get the grant, there would be a 35% reimbursement for whatever we would do in the area of security by the state. I already mentioned the security office at Foreign with respect to fortifying the glass window there. And then we made sure that all of our security components meet the state requirements, and we meet or exceed the state requirements, which is a real tribute to the school system. In the IT department, I already mentioned the new World Language Lab, but of course it was IT people who made that happen. We have new copy machines all the way through all of the school buildings. We entered into a new contract with the same Xerox, right? And so we have lots and lots of replacement copy machines. There were upgrades to every computer in the district to Windows 10 and Office 2016. Lots of computer maintenance. We also did a Power School upgrade, so to what they call version 11. Lots and lots of enhancements that give teachers much, much more power over their grade books and things that they can enter. And then lots of infrastructure upgrades, particularly at foreign and law high schools. Food services, last but not least, normal startup. West Shore required additional labor and adjustments to ready the school for the first day, but kids were being fed from day one. The food service is monitoring changes in lunch wave schedules at the elementary schools because, again, of the adjustments in times, changes in lunch service for start time, number of students in each wave, and time between waves, just to make sure that they're doing the best that they can to serve kids their lunches. They reviewed all the food allergy procedures because new kids come in every year with food allergies, and of course the lunchroom is one of the areas where you have to be so mindful of that. The food service were trained in new menu planning, etc. They also began the implementation of what's called NutriSlice digital menu program. The goal is to improve communication with parents and students. NutriSlice will provide mobile access to menus, food allergy, and nutritional information. So right on people's phones, which for parents is really helpful. And the estimated start date for that is October 1. And just so you have an idea of food service, in the first 2 weeks, they served 17,692 meals, 2,300 per day. And they received into the district 3,310 cases of food and supplies, or those of you that understand pallets, 35 pallets of food came into the district for the first 2 weeks of feeding the kids. So, long and the short of it is, what I'm always reminded when I sort of put this together is, we talk about what does it mean to be a system, and how important it is for a system to function well. You even have heard about, the concept of coherence. Well, this is an example, opening a school district, what it requires from every single division and department area. It makes the contribution to make it go smoothly. So kudos to everyone.
Great. Any questions from the board? Mr. Jagosinski?
Regarding busing, what are we doing to inform the parents about the opt-in provision?
Every parent was sent a voice from me, a voice telling them that the bus schedules were online, and if they were not eligible, that they had the option of looking into the non-eligible student opt-in program. And of course, it's on our website. But it went from me to every household, school messenger by voice and by email.
Other questions? I was wondering, I don't know if you can answer this or if Mrs. Swift might need to answer it, but the Housatonic Collaborative, so what does that look like? Do the students, do they take a bus over to Housatonic from Milford?
Yes.
Is
They
it like,
do.
are they there for a whole day, or is
They're
it?
there for a single class, and then there are days when they are there with our special ed teacher
Mhm.
and not the professor, where our special ed teacher does a lot of the environmental navigation, how to advocate for yourself, all the different places to get support and learn the resources on the campus, transportation training, all those kinds of things. And then there's work done back at Jonathan Law with both foreign and law students to be sure they're keeping up with their academics related to the coursework that they have with this class.
Mhm. Great.
So we're figuring it all out, but it's very exciting. We're very
Very good.
excited.
Thank you. Thanks. Any questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Fieser.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, which we're very excited about, is highlighting the work that's been done by our own teachers on 9/11, and then to hear about the impact the work has done with respect to the Tribute Center. So I'm going to pause, and are you introducing this, or Mr. Scott?
Sure.
You have someone the other way?
I do.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Right.
All right, so it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight our instructional highlight that's going to focus on the nationally recognized curriculum that we have around 9/11. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the longstanding relationship the Milford Public Schools has maintained with the 9/11 Tribute Center. Before I introduce I just wanted to invite all of you on Wednesday at 9 o'clock right here at Parsons in the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. We will be having our annual 9/11 presentation for 8th graders. There will be 2 speakers that will be coming up from the 9/11 Tribute Center. Frank Gorglione and Jerry Travis will both be joining us on that day to speak about their own personal experiences on 9/11. Mr. Gorglione was one of the first people to respond to the 9/11 tragedy, and Jerry Travis was the Vice President of Communications for ANON, who had an office on the 101st floor of the Trade Center on that day, and lost 75 of his colleagues on that day. So they will both be speaking to our 8th graders about that experience, and they'll also be speaking about the long-standing implications from 9/11. But tonight, we're going to hear from Rachel Rowley and a few of her students. Rachel was key in bringing together the teachers to write the 9/11 curriculum, and she's going to speak about that and also some upcoming changes having to do with the Tribute Center.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to try to stand out of the way so you can all see the screen. So this is a picture. I started in Milford in 2007 as a social studies teacher. And having taught in Bassick prior in Bridgeport, field trips were always very transformational experiences for my students. And so I'm a big believer in them, and organized my first field trip while I was teaching global studies to the United Nations. This is the group that we took. We also then went to the newly opened Tribute Center down in Lower Manhattan. The center was opened directly adjacent from the World Trade Center site on Liberty Street. And at this venue, students received a first-hand account of 9/11 by either someone who survived 9/11, who was a first responder on 9/11, or those who lost a loved one on 9/11. And obviously the site was still under construction, and so we weren't able to go there at the time, but they would take us over the West Side Highway to the World Financial Center, and they would, we would be overlooking the World Trade Center site, and these individuals would tell us their personal stories. And this particular one, my first group, was a story of loss. The gentleman in the center with the hat was a retired New York firefighter whose 24-year-old son was a firefighter on 9/11 and unfortunately passed away. Next to him is his wife, who was the first day of school in New York City that day, and it was her first day of retirement as a teacher that day. Next to them, the older woman lost her son on February 26, 93 bombings, and so she was kind of with them to be training as a docent to kind of share her story. And it was one of the most incredible, meaningful experiences our students had. I still have some of these students that I'm in touch with. My sister graduated with them, and they bring this up often when we see one another. They remember the story, they remember being there in Lower Manhattan. After hearing their personal stories, we went back to the museum and got a tour of the museum, which was very, very small and very limited, but very powerful. The man who started the museum, I just want to discuss him because he was really pivotal for me in my educational career and some of the things that I've done. His name is Lee Ielpe. He is also a retired New York City firefighter, a Vietnam War veteran, who lost his son Jonathan, who's in the lower picture there, on September 11th, also a New York City firefighter. And he started the Tribute Center because people were coming down to Lower Manhattan and wanted to talk about 9/11 and share experiences and kind of try to heal and restore one another. And so he created, along with a woman named Jennifer Adams, who lived in Lower Manhattan and was very helpful and neighborly to those in the community in the aftermath of the cleanup. And so the two of them started this museum with the purpose of bringing those firsthand experiences to students and people who would come through the Tribute Center. So that is Lee, extremely inspirational gentleman. And what was passed around to you, I believe, is one of the letters that he sent. So I've been doing this trip every single year that I've been in Milford. So this is going to be our 11th trip this coming November. And it's always an extremely powerful trip. You know, students get a lot out of it. And the 10th anniversary, he sent this, news blast. And this is the letter that he sent that I sat in my room and read one afternoon and was simply blown away that, here he is discussing the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and there's not a single state or district in the nation that has a September 11th curriculum. It just blew my mind.
Except Milford.
Well, at the time.
At the time, no.
At the time, no. That this letter is literally the catalyst for this. And that's why I gave it to you, because I sat there and I couldn't believe it, and I thought, as a social studies educator, what is more important, And so I went to, when we still had district coordinators, I went to Mary Mannion, who was our district coordinator at the time, and said, look at this letter, can you believe this? And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, write a curriculum. And she's like, absolutely. And so we started that. We went to Mike, the assistant superintendent at the time, to say, we'd really like to start this initiative, we think it's so important. And he said absolutely, and gave us kind of some parameters to work within. And so we were going to teach it grades 6 to 12. He said it needed to be aligned with our current curriculum, that we couldn't create a course, but that every year, grades 6 to 12, students would learn about 9/11 as a mini unit in the beginning of the year, and that learning would build as the years went on. And so that is pretty much what we created. Go through real quick some of the units, or the background on the units. So after we got Mike's okay, we surveyed all the social studies in the district and said, who would like to help? And about a dozen teachers signed up. And we met several times to kind of hash out what the curriculum was going to look like and what each of our courses' objectives were. And then I consulted with the Tribute Center to see if they would be willing to work with us, because I thought, they have such raw experiences, and education is kind of their whole motivation of existence. And so we went to the Tribute Center for Professional Development. They came here, I don't remember, meeting late, for several sessions of professional development, because it's interesting that in New York and various places in New Jersey, even, I'll show you the pictures from the summer, but talking to Lee this summer, there are still so many districts where it is just such a raw thing, because they've lost so many, and it's so personal even 16 years later, that they're opposed to education and they don't want it taught in the classrooms. So they were extremely thrilled when we said we want to work with you to create this curriculum. So we created our framework, we ran it for 1 year, and we came back and all talked about what went well, what didn't, and we kind of shifted some of the units around. And so this is what you have today in 6th grade. The whole point is for students to create an oral history of 9/11 and talk to someone they know who experienced it. Our sophomores were not born prior to 9/11, so our juniors and seniors have literally no personal recognition or remembrance of it at all on a personal level. Grade 7 is about terrorism and Al-Qaeda and what is terrorism. And then grade 8 is associated with U.S. history, and that's where they actually learn about the events of the day. And it's, for you and I, it's just such a personal thing, and it's really hard when you're talking to kids and they don't even know how many planes, or who attacked us, or why they attacked us. They just live in this post-9/11 world that they don't understand. So I think the education of 9/11 is central in social studies. Then in grade 9, they go through the victims and what are the qualities of the hero and a lot of the heroic tales that came out of 9/11. So it's not just this god-awful, depressing, these 2,996 people perished. And they learn a lot of those different stories. And then in grade 10, they investigate extremism and how did those ideas develop and how did these hijackers pull off what they did. Grade 11, we kind of break it up by course. So in American government, they learn about our domestic response and specifically the Patriot Act. And in grade 11, global studies classes, they learn about our military response. Right? It's the longest unofficial war we've waged in our nation's history. And then in grade 12, the culminating experience is the civilian response. So all of the good, all of the community that building that came out of 9/11. And that's our curriculum. I have it on CD. It's published on various websites. So if you ever like to look at it, I would be happy to get you a copy. So after we published the curriculum, I received an award from the Tribute Center in 2013. And with that award came a $500 grant. And so I talked to Fran and said, I really want to take this grant and multiply it. You know, I don't want to just buy something and then it sits there as a remembrance. And so Fran said, well, what do you want to do? And we came up with the September 11th, I don't know, any of you were there in 2013? So, a couple of you. We had a school-wide day of remembrance, reflection, and community service. It was the entire day. So Mayor Blake had the city ceremony at Jonathan Law. That's how we started the day. Prior to that, I totally skipped this. The Crowthers are who actually gave me the grant money. And I honestly had no idea about Wells' story before meeting them the day I accepted the award. And his story is incredible if you don't know it. He just epitomizes what a true hero is. So I would highly recommend Googling Wells Crowther. So prior to this day, we actually sold over 500 bandanas and raised over $6,000 to give back to the Wells Crowther Charitable Trust. So on this day, after the city's official ceremony, the students broke up by grade level and they went through the day in various activities. So one activity was a community service fair where people from the Milford, West Haven, Orange area came and set up tables, information about how students can get involved and volunteer. Another activity was first-hand accounts. And I so wish Mike DeGrego was here tonight, so I have a couple pictures of him. So he shared his experience cleaning up at the World Trade Center site after 9/11. One of our teachers' father-in-law worked down in Lower Manhattan and shared his harrowing experience of trying to get home. And then we also had some members of our school staff who were also in the military, who served in Afghanistan, come and share with the kids. And then we held a red bandana walk in honor of Wells Crowther. And so that made up our school day on 9/11 in 2013. So from that point, we really endeavored to create opportunities for students to engage in community service in honor of 9/11. And so we have held something every single year since 2013. And in 2014, we remembered the victims and their families. There is this exhibit, I guess you could say, on the internet on the New York Times called Portraits of Grief. And it has a bio created by the family members of every single person that was lost. And so that's all of the loss printed out on the paper. Today they've upgraded it and there are videos and different things from the family members. So each student was assigned an individual. And then you're supposed to research them a little more. And then we challenged them to commit a random act of kindness in their honor for 9/11. And so these are the letters that they wrote home to the victims' families. I then sent them to the My Good Deed organization, which is run by two gentlemen that lost their brothers on 9/11 for disbursement. Sorry, you probably can't read them from the screen. Then in 2015, as part of our academic day, Mike DeGrego came and spoke and shared his experiences with our social studies classes. Again, students were challenged to do a good deed in honor of 9/11, and this was the same time where the Zadroga Act bill, Congress was ignoring renewing it, which is the 9/11 healthcare bill. And so we had students, we shared Marcy Border's story. I don't know if you remember her. She's known as the Dust Lady. She died of stomach cancer right before school started in 2015 due to the 9/11 dust. And so students wrote letters to 2 senators and Rosa DeLauro in Washington, petitioning them to renew this bill. And so, sorry you can't see these. And Chris Murphy and Richard Blumenthal interacted with our kids. Chris Murphy sent a formal letter from his office. It was tweeted out by our advocate, and then Chris Murphy was tweeting with our kids as they commented. Richard Blumenthal's office sent back a personal letter to every single student that wrote to him. And unfortunately, Rosa DeLauro did not acknowledge the letters, but I thought the efforts of the other two were quite incredible. Here are some of the things that students did. And then last year, we decided we'd really like to create like an annual event to honor 9/11, and so Doolin's is so great and lets us use their property and their water for free. And so we held a car wash to honor first responders, and so we washed first responder vehicles for free. This past weekend, we held our second car wash, where we raised over $300 for the Tribute Center. And over 50 kids came. So, the Tribute Center was a small space. It quickly outgrew its space. It had over 4 million visitors in the first 5 years it was open. It was very tight. And so they moved down the street to Greenwich Street. And this is the opening here on June 13th. Mary Manning and I were invited to a preview because our students at Jonathan Law, because of the community service that we do, are featured all over the internet. Their website, we're featured all over a particular exhibit in the museum. So this is 2 of our former students. If you go on the website, you'll see their faces. So they expanded their exhibits. This is Lee talking to Mary. And at the end of all of the tragedy that you see in the exhibits, they want you to walk away with some hope for tomorrow, and to see the good that came out of 9/11. And so one of their exhibits is called Seeds of Service. And this is where different community service organizations are highlighted, and this is where our students are highlighted throughout the entire thing. So this is a portfolio of the area, and on those panels are different pictures of our kids from previous visits to the Tribute Center, community service events. There are kiosks where you can go and look up videos. Back in 2014, the Tribute Center came and took videos of our students about community service and why it's so important and the different community service initiatives they've done. And you can just push buttons and watch some of their videos. There's a close-up of one of the panels that features our students. So then in this other area of the same exhibit, there are TVs much like this, and they challenge you to make a commitment to do something good in the world in honor of 9/11. And so you can go up to the screens and tape your commitment. But as you're looking at the screen trying to figure out what to do, our kids are featured throughout the screens. They are preloaded in there, and that is what you see when you walk up. These are 2 of our current seniors. All right, who's going to be speaking in a minute, and one of our graduates. And then when you turn around, there's this huge screen that then has pre-populated different commitments people made, different fields they made in, their age groups. And so that screen kind of changes, but our kids are featured throughout it. So they are the ones whose faces move and shift. And it's really quite an honor. Millions of people go through the Tribute Museum, and when they go through this exhibit, they are going to see students of Jonathan High School. Questions? If you've never been, I highly recommend a visit.
Mrs. Federico?
Thank you. I just have to make a comment. I just have to say thank you for all that you're doing. I mean, it's a difficult subject to talk about, let alone teach, but you've recognized the importance of it, and I think what you're doing is truly remarkable, and I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for coming
Really
and sharing it with us. I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure. All right, so I have 3 students here who have participated in the curriculum, who have been to the Tribute Center, and they're just going to share with you a little bit about what they've gotten out of the curriculum, the impact it's made on them, and the impact the Tribute Center has had on them. So if I can have Ray, Rhea, and Morgan come on up so you guys can talk together. Who wants to start?
Sure. I'm Morgan. So just a little background. At the time that 9/11 happened, I was barely 1. So my mom said that day that I was in the car seat. She just dropped the brothers off at school. And then she remembers hearing about the information and running to the daycare and getting my brothers. And she said that whole day they just sat there in front of the TV. And now for me, I never really understood the impact until I was able to learn about the curriculum like Ms. Raleigh was speaking about. And it has impacted me greatly because especially the Tribute Center, you never realize how chaotic it was that day until you see the artifacts. And I remember the most haunting thing for me was seeing the wall with all the missing posters, and just to think about all these family members that lost their other family members, to me is just a tragedy. And it's also important to me because it realizes that I want to give back to remember those who helped others and for those who died that day. In addition, it also brought like meaning to me because it shows that we have to value every day because we don't know what's going to come the next day, and to be kind to others. And it was very haunting walking around the reflection pools and just the quietness of it. But it shows how a nation could come together under chaotic situations and just forget about our race, our diversity, and stuff like that. And I think that's the most important thing I learned from that and the curriculum.
So, my name's Ray, and just like Morgan said, I was born in 2000, I think we all were. So like we never really connected to 9/11 as you may, or like our parents or our teachers. So we never really realized or like got the grasp of how it's affected our lives and like how we're living now. So like going through the curriculum, learning about all the things that happened, like it just brought like, there's just so much emotion behind it, and like, so you learn so many lessons, like to be compassionate and to be brave. Like going to the Tribute Center last year, it was like, it like dawned on me how real 9/11 was. Like, no, it's because when learning in history, it's like you learn about like World War II, Pearl Harbor, and it's like, okay, like now we're like in 2017. But like 9/11, going to the Tribute Center and like seeing the clothes of people and like how they were battered and stuff, it's like you see like, wow, this like really happened not that long ago. Like this shaped our future, like how I'm living now. So like learning about the stories of 9/11 and like the curriculum, I've discovered so many things I never knew before. Like when we learned about 9/11 when we were younger, it's like, oh, you learn the twin towers, they got knocked down. But like as the grades moved on, we learned more and more. Like today, I just learned about how so many boats came and saved the people that like they were just stranded. Like people showed so much compassion. Like they just had hope, like for a better future of America, and like just kept working together. So like the curriculum and the World Trade Center just brought me, I don't know, just like, I don't know the word. What? Yeah, like it just made me have something to relate to. Like, wow, like this affected me as much as affected everyone else like I'm living with right now. So.
Yeah. As they said, we were born in 2000, so we didn't experience it firsthand. And I think that the curriculum is so important because with every year, every generation, it's further away from the tragic events of 9/11. But the curriculum is so important to preserve and honor the people that died that day, and not to forget what happened. And so I really think that the trip to the Tribute Center was so important because it really connected to everything that we had learned about with the curriculum that builds onto everything. So that just made it a really dynamic experience. We got to see the visual aids like helped us to better understand just the numbers. Like when we were walking around and looking at the reflection pools and seeing all the names, like that really made it so real to us because it just helped us understand the magnitude of the people that were lost and how tragic it was. And again, it just made the stories more real when we got to see all the artifacts in the Tribute Center, and when we got to hear firsthand from someone that was a survivor of 9/11. It just made everything so much more real to us and forced us to have a deeper connection with it because the person was standing there right in front of us, even though we weren't there or necessarily aware of what happened, like when we were younger when it actually happened. And finally, we just were able to gain a greater appreciation for the sacrifices and the bravery of all the first responders, seeing the firefighters' uniforms that were tattered and torn. We really saw how hard it was for the first responders to go in there and how many of them made sacrifices and lost their lives trying to save strangers. Yeah, so essentially just because we hadn't had the experience, it was so important to go to the Trade Center to make it so much more real to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the students? That was very informative. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Could you just speak to what's next? I mean, are you going to revise the curriculum? You mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah, so, we wrote this in 2012, revised it in 2013, but so much has happened. We're still in Afghanistan despite, Obama wanting to reduce troops under his presidency. There's still a need. Students still just need to be educated about tolerance, and that not all Muslims are terrorists, and to understand different religions, different cultures. They don't tend to come to us with that much background knowledge. And so I just think as the world evolves, the curriculum needs to evolve. And so there are some units that need revision purely because of that. Some of the data and statistics are already outdated.
Do you ever hear from parents with respect to the curriculum being taught?
Yeah, parents here have tended to be very open. I know when we first started the curriculum and Ralph was coordinator, he would share parent emails all the time, and they were very supportive and thankful for a place for their kids to go to learn about 9/11. It's very interesting because my daughter was 5. She was in kindergarten when 9/11 happened, and so she just kind of grew up in this post-9/11 world, and she was aware of it. But as we were writing the curriculum, Tom Ackery's children were infants, and so he was talking about how him and his wife have actually discussed, like, when are we going to tell our boys about 9/11 and how are we going to do it? And so that was a thought that never occurred to me because my daughter was already, here. And so I just think that parents are glad their children are learning. I know initially there were a few reservations about the intensity of what was included in the middle school units, because when we talk about terrorism in 7th grade, we're not instilling fear in the kids. But it is the world we live in. Like, try escaping the day without hearing about 9/11 somewhere. Whether it's on TV in one of the TV shows, news, 9/11 is everywhere all the time.
Rachel, what year are the students now who started in 6th grade and they're going each year through the curriculum?
What year?
Well, are they?
Were they born?
No.
How far are they?
Year
What
in
grade
high
are they in now?
So you started.
The students,
Have they
That's a great
graduated or?
question.
I tried to do the math.
Are they in 10th grade?
You started what year
So
teaching?
we did the first round before revisions in 2011, 2012 school year.
So 5 years ago.
No, 2012, 2013 school year, because that letter is from 2011.
So 7.
So 5 years. So
5
they're
years.
Seniors now?
Yeah.
So
Or maybe 11?
some of the seniors have been
Or 11
through
graders.
the entire, from 6th grade through.
Are you ladies in? Are you seniors?
Yeah,
we're seniors.
Did you start in 6th grade with the new curriculum?
Did you see the first piece in 6th grade, or was it 7th or 8th when you
Probably
first?
don't remember.
You don't even remember.
There's definitely a curriculum in middle school.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I don't.
So at least 6 years, right?
Yeah, so 6 years, right, from doing math on my fingers?
Yeah, sounds like. If I may make a comment, as part of your curriculum, I know you touch upon it, but it's a question we have not successfully answered to date, and that is, how does one successfully turn away those who would use terror as their choice, and how do we, what can we do to solve some of the problems, and that goes to root causes and to belief systems and to some of the most difficult questions that we as a society face, and that is, you know, how do we proceed from here and end up with a peaceful world, which I think is, you know, the objective of the great, most of the people in the world. They wouldn't have lived in peace. And there are those few who choose not to take that path. And we will always probably have those who are on the fringes who hate. I mean, the KKK is still here. It hasn't gone away, right? But we do what we can to minimize their impact. And how do we achieve that? And how do we achieve the ongoing effort to minimize the impact of terrorism in our world? And, you know, because you probably can't ever get rid of true evil, but you can tamp it down to the point where it's not an existential threat.
I mean, I don't have a solid answer to that. Like, I would be able to.
I think it's a rhetorical question.
But I know that in our 10th grade unit, part of the unit on extremism is to recognize it. You know, and I know in our crime and punishment class, you know, that applies. The same idea applies to like cults and having students recognize like, you know, cultish behavior. So just the recognition of it is part of our curriculum. I think that. You know, we're all individuals, and it can't change anybody. We are who we are, and we can enlighten these kids through education and give them opportunities and have them make, hopefully, like the whole goal of ours is to enlighten them and make them pillars of peace and education in the world. And so the end unit on community service is, what good can I do? What can I do to make good in this world? And so I've had in the past, you know, we challenged students in this final unit to create a community service initiative of their own. Our Milford Chamber of Commerce, I honestly, when we were writing the curriculum, they still did it, but I don't know if they still do. They were doing $200 grants every year for students who, like they would have to initiate a project, and if they received it, they got $200 to bring their project to light. And so we had students doing that. And so, you know, you can't control other people, you can only control yourself. And, you know, having those projects available and open to students, I think, helps.
Helps some. I'm just talking about the touching upon, from your educational standpoint, an inclusion of thoughts about, you know, we face some serious challenges, and we have not yet found successful answers, and we just have to keep working on it.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Mr. Jagosinski?
I'm you know, I'm positive you're well aware of it, but as you change the curriculum, there's always a danger that you can get into a political minefield in this, and, you know.
I think our job as social studies teachers is to walk that fine line and to remain as unbiased as possible. You know, I taught civics for about 10 years, and my students would walk out of my class at the end of the semester and they had no idea what my political affiliation was. And they shouldn't. And so I think that's our job as educators, is not to give them one side or the other, but it's to present them with both and have them make educated decisions.
That's great. I think that's exactly where we need to be.
Any other questions?
Just one other closing comment. One of the things Rachel has spoken with me about, and I presume that she's spoken with Mr. Scott, is to give greater attention to the curriculum at the state level. Not with the idea for recognition of Milford, but It is astounding to us that across the nation, this is not being taught in schools. That our curriculum, according to the Tribute Center, Milford Public Schools curriculum is the only one in the nation, which is pretty astounding. So the thought is, we may not be able to influence in terms of nationally, but could we influence at the state level to have the state start to think about, should there be teaching be done in every school in Connecticut around 9/11? So, we had given a copy to the former commissioner, who actually was on the board of the Tribute Center, and so knew about it quite a bit, but he wasn't here long enough for us to be able to move forward with anything, so we're gonna try again. But once the curriculum is revised and,
Lee Ielpi, the founder of the Tribute Center, is, just knows so many people. We were at the 20th anniversary of the 93 bombings, and we had special passes on the World Trade Center site with him, and he was just like hobnobbing with former Mayor Dinkins, Bloomberg, Giuliani, and just, his influence is so extensive. I live in the Milford world, and when I saw him in June, he said to me, "Do you know that you are still the only city that I know of in the entire nation that has a 9/11 curriculum?" And that is an absolute travesty, and he has said to me numerous times that, if we ever want to create an initiative to have it mandated, he would be completely on board and help in any way he can.
Yes, Dr. Gregory.
Just if you start hitting roadblocks with legal avenues, possibly the accrediting body for the educator preparation programs for social studies, NCSS, might be another way to go.
thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much. That was very informative.
So the students, I would imagine, you may have homework? So you're welcome.
Feel free to head home.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know how to turn this on. I'm sorry.
That's shocking.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Oh, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is our budget priorities and assumptions for the 2018 budget. And you may be thinking, gosh, it's September. The truth is, we literally begin for ourselves the budget process before the end of the month. Mr. Rich Kelly will be meeting with all of the building principals and site supervisors to give them their budget packet, so to speak. So it's appropriate that we bring these forward, and we've done this for the last few years where we brought them in September. However, we've never been in this position before where we're bringing forth a set of budget assumptions and priorities and assumptions, and there is no state budget. So there's that caveat. We were very, very conscious when we began to develop these, and you will see that, in both documents there is a statement to that effect. So under priorities, the priorities assume that any state budget reductions will minimally impact the current budget and the 2018-19 Board of Education budget. Obviously, if the budget that ultimately gets passed significantly impacts, then there will be modifications to these. But we didn't feel we could conjecture. So with that, you have the priorities in front of you. Most of these should be familiar because these priorities, quite honestly, are common every year, most of them. So, obviously providing safe facilities, sustaining the core instructional program, maintaining effective class sizes, and we listed here what the current board guidelines are for class sizes, providing all staff ongoing professional learning and best practices, etc., supporting the district's summer learning program for our students, supporting existing student extracurricular activities and athletics, and to continuing to support the school resource officer. So, you know, the priorities wouldn't necessarily change from year to year, although, for example, one year a priority had to do with the reconfiguration, or if there was something, you know, that was going to be significantly different from one year to the next, then there would be a priority around that. The priorities, again, they reflect more the importance that we place on decision-making. So, you know, it's simplify it, for example, around instructional, we start to ask the question of, well, what's best for kids? Safety and security, you know, is anything going to be jeopardized if we make a change of some kind or back off of something? So that's what we're talking about when we're referencing priorities. The assumptions, on the other hand, get into the specifics tied to the budget itself, and it provides estimates. So the figures that are here, with except for if there's something contractual that we know actually is going to be in place, they're much more concrete relative to budget pieces itself. But there again, the opening bullet is new. How the ongoing state budget crisis will affect funding of the board remains a huge unknown. So there may have to be very different and maybe very difficult decisions that would be made depending upon the outcome there. So with the enrollment, as you well know, the enrollment's going to continue to decline. It's going to decline at a slower rate, at least according to the NASDAQ figures. When we look now, we'll get the newest based upon October 1. We'll get that right at the beginning of November. But just going back to a year ago and looking, there's a continued decline, but it's the percent of decline is lessening, so to speak. So, you know, some class sizes, when we, particularly at the elementary level, we don't have as much flexibility because in some grade levels we have like 2 sections. It means that some class sizes may reach the upper limits on the board guidelines. Decisions around staffing and program design, you know, will be driven by their potential impact on raising student achievement. But at the same time, we continue to be mindful of the need to be fiscally responsible. Salaries, and this is definitive, so these are real figures, for all employees will increase on average 2.5 to 3.5%, which includes the contractual step increases. The reason why we know this is we actually can look what's anticipated. The biggest one is, for example, the teacher increase for next year, but then to look at all the others. And we know it's within that range that the salaries will increase. Health insurance, on the other hand, you will note is estimated to increase by 8 to 10%. And it's so early because it's often based upon premiums, not premiums, on your history and as far as claims, et cetera. But this is our best estimate. Special education out of district tuition and transportation is also very difficult to predict because the students change. So kids going out of district one year may not be going out of district the next year. Some kids finish. We had 3 students come back in this year. So to try and predict the percent of increase is really difficult because it just moves continually. Plus, we don't know how much how many students might be placed by the state in district, which may come literally after the budget is determined, and we have to find the monies to pay for that, et cetera. But what we are doing based upon past experience, and we keep very good stats on that so that we can monitor the trends, is that there would be a 6 to 9% increase in tuition and a 7 to 10% increase in special education transportation. Again, these are estimates, but that's our best, I don't want to say guess because it's not a guess, but that's our best estimate based upon the history and the data that we have. Transportation, this is real, will rise by approximately 3% because of the contractual increase with Durham. This is regular ed transportation. Special education is different, as stated above. Natural gas and electricity costs are expected to remain relatively stable. The estimated increase for utilities is 3 to 5%. Electricity, some of it should be offset by the anticipated solar installations, but we're not going to see that this year we're not going to see any of it, correct? Next year maybe a little. It's really over time that we'll start to really see that kick in. The SRO, we would really like to continue that, so we made that as an assumption going forward, that the SROs would remain in place with us sharing 50% of the cost. We will commit to finding efficiencies within the budget. I think we have a pretty good track record of that over the last few years, several years I would say. And that we will, we are assuming that we will continue to be charged tuition for students attending the Bridgeport Magnet Schools. We're assuming that because we have not heard otherwise. So the assumption is going forward that we would be paying the tuition. So those are the priorities and assumptions. I'd be more than happy, any one of us, to answer any questions that you may have. This is for a first read.
Jagosinski?
Is the state saying anything about them not paying for the residence cost for special education students? I know this was an issue.
Right. We have not heard anything since last winter about that. I think that this is my thinking, the outcry was so enormous. I believe that the Department of Developmental Services kind of pulled back, and the state, and we just haven't heard a single thing, and it hasn't been in the governor's budget, and we haven't seen it in any of the proposed budgets from either party, for example. So that's an assumption that we're making because we haven't told them otherwise. But it's a good question. It was really frightening to think if we were going to be charged that.
Other questions? Mr. Wiskiman?
Now this is for the following year. I just back to the current situation. Any impacts on the delay of the state issuing a budget immediately for us? Do you anticipate no immediate impacts while they continue to just spin their wheels? Or is there some immediate impact that, say, October 1st, we're faced with some sort of issue that we need to deal with this year?
Well, it's my understanding come October 1 that that's the point at which the first kind of set of monies go out to districts, whether it be for ECS, which goes into the city. I don't know if the same thing happens with IDA. Ms. Swift, I don't know if that's the case. If the IDEA monies comes in like quarterly, does it?
I think it comes
For the grants?
I don't think it's quarterly. I think it's
twice a year.
Twice a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but your money, you haven't received it yet this year.
I don't think so.
Correct. That's correct. Most of the revenue that comes from the state goes to the city, and the city has already funded us for the year. So we don't anticipate there's going to be any stoppage or anything like that. But there's smaller grants, such as the Family Resource Center that Dr. Fieser made you aware of in the weekly update. Things like that, where if the payment doesn't come, or if there's not going to be continued funding, small programs like that could be impacted
This year.
And I mean, the possibility, we don't know where what kind of budget the legislature is going to ultimately pass. Once they do, if there's a steep decrease to the city, we don't know what the city is going to ask of the board.
Right.
So, I mean, it's very much up in the air at this point.
There's nothing we can anticipate or consider at this point in time. Okay.
Until we get a budget.
Thank you.
Which hopefully is going to be soon. I think they're meeting, one of the houses is meeting this week.
We certainly hope so. Yes. Thank you.
I had a question on the priorities. It occurred to me, as I was reading these for the second bullet, that we don't mention the arts, and I'm, wanted to ask about the potential to add, I think it is considered part of our core instructional program, literacy, numeracy, science, social study, and the arts. I think that as a board, it's often something that parents are afraid if we have major budget reductions, or that, the arts are always gonna get eliminated or reduced. So I don't know how my fellow board members feel about making a statement that we have a commitment to fund our current arts programs.
I would favor that.
Do you have any objection to that? Is there any reason why we shouldn't add it, Dr. Fieser, that you can think of?
No, it's not. I think when it was, because this has been in for
Yes, it has been. I went back and looked last year, and I didn't think of it last year.
Right,
So.
and when we think in terms of the core instructional program, it's generally your English language arts, math, science, social studies. The social emotional learning was added in from the perspective of whole child.
Right. Yeah.
But no, we certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't have difficulty including the arts.
I have heard, now I might not have heard you have said it in the past, but I remember Mr. Cummings speaking, to, we now consider the arts to be part of our core program. So I think if that's the case, it would be a good idea to include it. Okay, does anybody object to that?
Oh, no, but I had other questions.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, I just wanted to ask, for that particular suggestion. Yes, Mrs. Federico?
On the assumptions, when you mentioned the enrollment declining at a lower rate than the past trend, could you get us an idea of the percentages that you're referring to?
Sure. I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but we certainly can get you, just send you the NESDEC, the historical decline that has occurred each year, as well as like over the last decade.
Okay.
So you can see, and then what is it projected? They with some confidence project, out another. They project like 7 years out, 5 to 7 years out. They actually do 10, but they really have the greatest confidence in 5 years out of the 10.
Okay.
Because that's based on the birth rate, et cetera.
And you'll send us that anyways, right?
Yes, we can send that to you.
But we would be getting that?
No, we wouldn't be getting that
don't.
normally, no. She would send it special.
Okay.
She would send us the information.
When we talk about when that comes in, we generally make that part of some of our budget discussions.
Mm-hmm.
The NESDEC, what are they saying with respect to projected enrollments? And, has there been a big shift, based upon what they said a year ago, just, projecting how much will it be for 2018 and what are they now going to say about 2018?
Right,
We do
right.
look at that, and that piece has been shared with the board in the past.
Okay, yeah, I think it would just be helpful for me if we're referring to the percent and the rate and the, just to know what those percents and rates are.
Sure.
Okay, and then another question on the solar installations. So I get that it's too early to predict potential savings. When do you think we might be able to predict potential savings?
Well, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we haven't gotten past the contractual stage yet.
Okay.
So we don't have any of the units actually in. We have approvals from the city, and we have ZRECs for 3 buildings right now, but we have to get past the contractual. And that piece, as I mentioned last month, doesn't have to do with the solar itself. It has to do with we're locked in. We would have to bid through an electric consortium or an electricity consortium, and our price is locked in for electricity through 2020. If we put solar in, we're going to significantly decrease the amount of energy we're going to be buying from our supplier. So they've raised objections to that, and they want to adjust our rates, which we're objecting to. So we're going through the negotiation stage right now, so that it makes sense to put the solar in, so that we're not, in the short term, we're not losing dollars because we're paying more for the electricity that we're buying from the grid. So we're still in that phase. We do anticipate that we will work this out, and at least 3 of them, our hope is that we'll still be able to put them up this fall, which
Okay.
means that we'll start generating electricity sometime early next year. That's our goal.
Okay.
It's an aggressive goal, but we think we can do it. And so, you know, we probably won't have figures until, you know, sometime in the late spring, which is after you've done your budget. the
Okay,
new budget.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and also the dead of the winter is not prime solar producing time. So it's gonna be difficult till we get about a year cycle in the solar to know exactly what the savings is gonna be.
Okay.
I was actually going to ask if it's fair to even have that sentence in these assumptions at all, if we should be, for this 18-19, making any assumption.
That's a fair point, yeah.
I mean, is it being overly optimistic that we're going to have some appreciable, you know, savings that's even worth thinking about?
Yeah, I guess I was wondering if you'd have a better idea by January, and if not, then it wouldn't really factor into the budget.
We can take it out. I mean, if that's the consensus of the board.
Probably it just, you know,
Trade part
there's just
for
no way
solar.
to even know what we're gonna see this year, this budget year.
You know, I think putting it in for the next cycle makes more sense, because you'll have a little bit more idea. So. Any other comments on this or discussion questions? Ms. Tobias?
I was just wondering if you heard anything about New Haven magnet schools maybe starting to charge students?
No, and we would have had to have been notified by September
advance,
1st.
yeah.
That's under the law.
Yeah, I knew they had to apply and stuff, so they haven't applied, nothing.
No.
Okay. Is that for the next school year, September 1st of this school year
Right.
for next school year?
That's correct.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Hagedorn.
There's been no talk still, if they do cut the budget, about relinquishing some of the mandates. Haven't heard anything on that?
Minimal, and lots of legislation was passed while they did not have a budget, and so more mandates have come through.
Yeah, I know, that's why I was asking, is there anything that just makes it harder to work with those numbers, so to speak? Insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, sometimes what happens is that a law gets passed and it hasn't been thought through, and so then there's some modifications made to it. And case in point was training for, you know, physical and restraint training. And initially when the law came through, it was for every single employee in the district. And, you know, it was like, first of all, are you kidding me? How do we even begin doing that? But secondly, why would we? Why would we? Because it should really only be, you know, a select group of people who would ever engage in, you know, making use of that kind of training. And so the law was changed, and they backed that down to the essential personnel that would be appropriate to be trained in that. So there's been some of that, but meanwhile there's additional new legislation now that has come in that's going to.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if you heard anything about rescinding some of that, because if they to make big cuts, that would help us on decision making.
Other questions?
So this is a first reading, which means that you'll come back and we'll revisit it in October, and we may be having a very different conversation depending upon what happens with the budget. That's if a decision is made.
Yes, correct.
Before the next meeting. One would hope.
Yeah.
So the next agenda item really is, this is now policy. And we have, for first reading, 3 new policies that are being brought forward. And these are resident and non-resident students reporting to parents and guardians and hazing. So the resident and non-resident students, quite honestly, we made no changes. Believe it or not, this was a policy. The last time it was looked at was, or I should say revisited, was 1993. Actually. Oh, 2013, excuse me, I'm sorry, 2013. My error. So, but that was 4 years ago, so, but we took a look at it, several of us, and we actually looked at caves as well. And we really feel that what is articulated in this policy is appropriate, that there was no need for changes. You know, there is an administrative regulation, and so there's some tweaking that, you know, will occur in there, some clarifying pieces, but nothing of significance. So we are bringing forth this policy as is.
Mrs. Krasinski actually sent me a couple of housekeeping corrections. Thank you for doing that, Mrs. Krasinski, for this policy. The first paragraph and last paragraph, just changing town of Milford to city of Milford on this one. So then that was it. Yes, Mrs. Federico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on item point number 2. So in the case of a child whose parents are divorced or separated, it talks about where he or she actually resides and spends the majority of his or her time. What if it is a 50-50 even split custody arrangement?
Essentially, it's a choice of the family.
Okay. Okay. So does that need to be covered in the language, or does this
it comes through in it's a legal document that comes through to the school system itself. So the principal receives the legal document indicating that it's joint custody and this is where the child will be attending school. That's all. It's all in.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I meant in the language of the policy. The policy seems to assume that there's going to be a majority in one home or the other. It doesn't say there's a choice if it's a 50-50 joint split.
Well, I mean, we certainly could add something in here, but basically what it will say is that you know, if it's joint custody, whatever the courts indicate is where the child will be attending, whether the child would be attending.
Okay.
There's also some further clarification in the administrative regulation around
Okay.
that, and typically in those cases we go by a case-by-case basis
Okay.
to ensure that there is that joint residency as well as joint custody.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that occur behind the scenes. This
Right.
is pretty accurate when it comes to the law.
Okay.
There again, I mean, I think that what people need to understand is that there isn't a school that doesn't exist in the district that doesn't have, you know, legal documentation around either custody or, you know, residency or visitation rights to the schools, who picks kids up, et cetera. That's commonplace in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's all dictated by whatever the court order is.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at it from the perspective of if I'm a parent who's, you know, just gotten divorced and I'm trying to figure all of this out, and I go online and I look at the policy, you know, to see where my child could go to school, and it's not, and I might feel like it's not answered here. And if I could go to the administrative regulation and see the answer there, then that might be fine.
We'll take a look at that, but we're hesitant to tell parents. We don't make the decision.
Right.
It's made by whatever the decision is that came through through the custody issue. I mean, we follow whatever it is that we're handling.
So the court document will say which parent they go to school in their district.
Where the child is to reside, and then it goes with depending upon you know, how much the child is residing in the community, or for example, if it's joint custody and the child spends 3 days a week at one parent 1 week and 4 days at another, etc. But it'll stipulate, but the child is considered to be a resident to attend such and such a school. I mean, that's generally
Okay.
spelled out.
Okay. Okay.
And the AR is also right under the policy online.
Okay, perfect.
People go to that also.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Jagosinski?
In the second paragraph, I'm not really clear what the phrase "provided without pay" means.
So in essence, if I will, I live in another district, I come here and I pay you to come here to go to school. As you would say, I'm living in your home. I'm gonna pay you to live in this home as an individual student, just to take advantage of the school, in essence. So it's not, you can't rent out a space in our schools, to a non-resident just by maybe renting out your mailbox. So you're paying out, folks come from other districts and essentially pay to come here sole purpose of going to the schools. I've never experienced the case, I don't know if you have.
We've had some residency, this has come up during our residency hearings that we've had, where, the question is, if you've got a whole bunch of people living in one room of a house, are they just simply saying that are they paying that person to have use of that room so that their children can go to Milford Public Schools? That's what it boils down to.
So when we have generally speaking, if there is a child who is coming to school in Milford, but residing with someone who is, for example, not their parents, the law basically says you cannot, a child can't reside with someone else for the purpose of education. So what Mr. Bird is saying is that if he wanted one of his daughters to come to the Milford Public Schools and approached you and said, could she come and live with you? I'll pay you under the law that is against the law. In fact, it even would be against the law if he didn't pay you and said, if the sole purpose was for education. So that's what that's referring to. And we have students, for example, who may be residing with someone other than their parents, and they have to complete an affidavit annually in which they are attesting to the fact that the sole reason is not for education. And that's, and we require that annually, even if a person's been in the school district for 3 years. Each year they have to submit that, because if they're violating it, in essence, they've committed fraud.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions?
The second policy has to do with reporting to parents and guardians. This really has to do with us reporting out officially on grades and teachers reporting to parents and guardians, and then also monitoring progress, etc. There has been a significant amount of change here. This is the policy that I air. This is the policy that the last time it was developed in 1994. So there was a lot of the language that was in here that really didn't even consider anything electronic, and so much is electronic at this point. So what you see here is, first of all, that we value two-way communication, and that there's all kinds of ways in which communication can take place, and you will see, email is added, as well as, other means of communication. And report cards, it's not the traditional way in which report cards used to be, mailed home to every student in the district, etc. So we reflected in general that there's a schedule, which we do have a schedule of schools in the schools for what would be considered those quarterly or trimester reports. Some of them, are at the elementary level. They're actually given to the student, and the student takes them home. Middle and high school, it's electronic. We also have a statement in here, and we ran this by principals to make sure we are okay with this, that at the end of a third quarter in high school, if a student is failing, that families should be notified, the student should be notified that he or she is failing, and obviously any time thereafter. So it could be into the fourth quarter when a student really starts to dip. In the same way with the middle school, that it would be in the trimester for 6 to 8 students. And then the monitoring of progress, because now parents can monitor their students on our information systems parent portal. You know, we wanted to make sure that we spoke about that in the policy itself. So in grades 6 through 12, parents and guardians can monitor student progress. And then it's the responsibility of the teacher to enter regularly into the portal information on students' performance. And to use the portal, there's an area for comments to also be used if a teacher were to choose to do that. There's an expectation on the part of parents that they'll contact the school if there's any indication of classroom difficulties or, for example, failure, et cetera, you know, because we would want to make sure that there's communication there and an effort to change the behavior, to increase student performance, et cetera. So that's, so there's a lot of revisions to the originals, just simply because of it's 20 plus years old policy.
I was glad to see that student successes were included in the list in the first paragraph rather than just, you know, note home when there's something wrong. Should be a note home when something's good too. Yes, Mrs. Krasinski?
I have a question about report cards. Letting parents and guardians know by the middle of the 3rd trimester for 6th to 8th grade if their student is failing. That's only a couple of weeks left to school. At the end of there's 3 trimesters and that to me seems very late if your student is on the verge of failing a class.
We looked at, and we can check again. I worked with Louis Giancola, who is, you know, the IT person who oversees the whole parent portal piece, and he had the schedule, and in the middle of the 3rd trimester is almost exactly when the end of the quarter or the beginning of the 4th quarter is for high school. The dates, I mean, the dates were, so that's why we
And
put
that
it
seems late to me too, but I'm just wondering, is it possible for a student to bring their grade up enough if they're failing at that point to not fail for the year? If it's that late in the...
Well, I would say yes, unless a student is literally at 0, which if they're at 0, that would already be known.
Okay.
You know, kids sometimes they just start to slide, you know, or they haven't turned their work in or whatever it may be. Critical piece here was the notification. And quite honestly, with respect to the parent portal, one would assume that, you know, there's already indication that, you know, a parent looking at it or a teacher looking at it and seeing that the grades are really sliding there. But I'll double check that, because I was mindful of that too, because it's on a trimester versus a quarter. But as I said, when we looked at the schedule, you know, what Louis said is you're almost, you know, like within days of when it would be for the quarterly, at the end of that 3rd quarter.
If I may, I think there's a difference between regular communication between the teachers and the school about someone who's having difficulty in class, as opposed to this is the official notification that you may not get, at the high school level in particular, you may not get credit for this course and you may have to repeat it. So, and it's no later than, so this is the last date. But we would expect our schools, our teachers, and our principals to be contacting parents long before this if there's any issue. This is more about, you know, if there's a loss of credit, you're gonna have to repeat, or summer school, that's what the latest date that we would notify parents so they can prepare, perhaps get ready. This is also for summer school, registering for summer school and things like that as necessary. This is all around the time when we start doing our scheduling for the following year. So if a student does need to repeat, this is when guidance counselor would meet with them in terms of scheduling those courses next year.
Mrs. Federico?
Thank you. Underneath monitoring progress, when it talks about the responsibility of the teacher to enter regularly into the portal information on students' performance in class, what if the teacher doesn't enter the information regularly?
And that's something that should be reported, well, first of all, to the teacher, but then to the building principal.
Okay.
Because that can be monitored. You know, the building principal has access on the portal and can see, you know, how many grades are being entered.
Okay.
You know, and it's not like that we don't just say, well, there should be 10 grades, because courses differ, you know, and the kind of project the kids are working on, et cetera. But absolutely, you should go directly to the principal.
Right, I mean, if there's you can see if there's a gap between the date of the assignment and the date that the grade was posted, I would assume, right? Yeah. Okay, because I do hear that from parents sometimes, that they don't know how their child is doing because the information is not posted frequently enough.
And again, I would say something to the teacher, and if it's to no avail, I'd go straight to the principal.
Okay. Is there an expectation or something covered in the administrative regulation about what's considered regularly? So,
I think, you know, it's I mean, again, I don't, there's nothing like specifically written in a regulation, but the expectation on the part of teachers, any good teacher is that you assess sufficiently so that you have, you know, information that's really going to inform you then when you go to make a determination as to, you know, what grade you might issue for a student.
How about a time frame is there a time frame within which they're expected to enter the grades after exam test is given, for instance?
I'd have to ask that question. I don't have an answer to that.
I think, I don't know where I read it, I don't know if it was this, no, it's not there. I thought there was something of 10 days, like within 10 days of the grades, the assignment being completed, there was, I don't know where I read that, could be, or maybe I made it up. I don't know.
I'll pursue it. You can pursue
do
that.
you have a question?
Well, she actually asked the
Okay.
same exact question.
All
I was on the same page, because I want to know who was monitoring it, and then,
There you go.
because I have heard from different parents some things that some teachers are doing it more, some teachers are not, and, you know, is there some sort of, you know, criteria of when they're supposed to enter it in, because some people feel like they're just left out.
Tell them to go talk to the principal.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
The next policy is on hazing. And this policy, we made significant changes to it. We worked off of the K policy. This had been developed in 2001, so it's only 6 years old. We included language that I think was more succinct and also more pointed from our perspective, and also you know, the role of the adults around the issue of hazing, and also the role of adults if they were to engage in hazing itself. You know, so there was language that we saw in some other policies that just we thought made the policy stronger. So that's what I would offer.
Mr. Jagosinski?
Yeah, what has been our experience with hazing? Have we had any problems with it?
Since I have been here, no. I think our teachers, I think our coaches are really vigilant around that. Both of our athletic directors, I think that the whole, you know, philosophy in the district, my sense is that this is not about winning, and this is not, everything isn't about winning, and everything is, and you know, if we don't look upon, for example, freshmen as, you know, the kids that you beat up or whatever it may be. So I'm not mindful of that, but I can't speak with expertise over the, you know, but I'm not mindful of there being acts of hazing.
And the other thing, in the old policy, it was very specific about having to address the hazing issue, you know, with every group. And possibly it was overkill. But in the revised policy, there's nothing that says that the issue should be raised. And I was wondering, you know, is that appropriate?
Can you point to specifically what you're talking about?
Yeah,
I'm not understanding
if you
what you're
go
saying.
to the page 2 of 2. And the second full paragraph, each principal, athletic coach, cheerleading, etc., shall
Oh, I
inform
see.
his or her students about this policy. At a minimum, such communication shall take place prior to the beginning of each team or group's activity for the year. So you have a situation where,
I
you know,
see.
if somebody's on 3 teams, you know, they're advised 3 times. You know, and you're talking about clubs and music programs and other extracurricular activities. I think that's too much. But in the revised policy, we say nothing about advising the students about hazing.
And I hear what you're saying, and we certainly could include something. I think it was inferred in the second paragraph. You know, only it was the reverse, you know, nobody is to encourage, permit, condone, or tolerate hazing activities. So the assumption is, if this is not to be tolerated, that gets communicated very clearly. But, you know, there's no reason to say we certainly couldn't include a statement if that's the wish of the board.
And the fact that this hasn't been an issue over the years, you know, makes it less significant that it be brought up. So that was the reason why I asked that question.
What's interesting that you say that because we haven't brought forward the bullying policy, but the bullying policy changes in it from K, kind of subsumes hazing under bullying. And we talked a little bit about that, and you know, ultimately, I just felt strongly that there needed to be a standalone hazing policy, as opposed to it just kind of gets pulled in. I know that hazing can be viewed as a form of bullying, but I just felt a standalone was an important piece.
Based on our discussion, I think I'm comfortable with what you proposed.
So those are for a first reading. So we will bring these back in October. And then we have 3 policies which are for review here for a second reading. So I thought the first one was sexual discrimination.
The first one just has some housekeeping items in
So
it.
it's out of order, so that, we can take the student records and confidentiality first, if you don't mind, since it's the first one in your packet here. And this policy, you can see that the changes were made primarily with respect to guardians, and those were the only changes that were requested. So I don't know if anyone has any
further questions on this?
Questions on this?
Do you have a motion, Mr. Bias?
Yes, I have a motion that the Milford Board of Education approve policy P5125, student records confidentiality as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Federico seconded. Any further discussion? You seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The second one in your packet is weapons and dangerous instruments. So, really, there's no changes except for some legal references, which, yeah, I'm so sorry about that. Is there. There was a question that had been asked about the last paragraph on the first page, where it begins, the possession or use of any such weapon or device will require that the proceedings for the suspension and or expulsion of the student involved will be initiated immediately by the principal. And then the next piece, if the student is found to have possessed a firearm or other dangerous weapon as defined in the statutes, he or she must be expelled for 1 calendar year. And the question was raised, should that be reordered? And so we thought about reordering it, but then as the more and more we read it, the first one talks about possession or use of a weapon. You know, whether or not a student is found to be that way, then the principal immediately has to initiate to move to a suspension or expulsion. And then from there, the piece is what the law says, that the student should be expelled for 1 calendar year if the student is found to be. So the principal initiates it, does the investigation, et cetera, it comes forward for a request for expulsion. But the decision on the expulsion is ultimately with the hearing officer. So we felt that the order of the paragraph actually was appropriate.
Okay. That was my thing. When I read it through this time, it didn't even jump out at me as being sounded strange, so I was good with that. Any questions on this one? Mr. Bias?
Okay, make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy P 5131.7, weapons and dangerous instruments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Federico has seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And the third policy is sexual discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace. Just a reminder, this is a 4,000s policy, so this really has to do with personnel. And so a minor piece in paragraph 2 was that, any employee who believes that he or she's been subjected to sexual harassment is immediately to report it to the Title IX coordinator, which in this district is Wendy Kapasna. And then, we in the absence of a victim's complaint, the superintendent, upon learning, et cetera, would ensure that an investigation takes place. This next paragraph in blue is really the paragraph, the last paragraph in the document that was given to you last week. So we moved it because the question that was raised the last meeting, is that the last paragraph seemed to sort of hang out there. So when we looked at it more, we thought, well, okay, the first 3 paragraphs on page 1 is introduction to the policy. Any employee who believes that they've been harassed, here's what they should do. And then it goes into more detail about any infraction of this policy by employees of the Milford Public Schools, by members of the Board of Education, et cetera. So we felt that the paragraph was fine as is, but move it, and it flowed much better where
It does, I agree. Any questions on this, Mr. Jagosinski?
Does the Title IX coordinator have sufficient authority to deal with the complaint that would be directed against the superintendent?
I believe there's a statement in here that
Goes
if
to
it's
the Board of Education.
if a complaint about the superintendent were to be made, it's
Okay.
halfway through that paragraph.
Okay.
The complaint is to be brought to the Board of Education.
Correct. It's like 4 sentences down it starts.
Yes, I see it.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Bias?
Okay, make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy P 4115, sexual discrimination and sexual harassment as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Federico has seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So then we move to the Human Resources Report, Mrs. Kapasna.
Thank you. I know we just had a report not too long ago, but as you can see, we do have quite a number of changes, as we do every month. Resignations, retirements, terminations, as well as new employees coming on board. And then this month, we have quite a few stipend appointments, all of which are by contract. You'll notice the guidance counselors in here, that's a contractual stipend that they get. We also have the high school coaching stipends for the fall, for both foreign and law enclosed as well.
Mrs. Krasinski?
Just a question, the cross-country coaches,
Yes.
do they, there's 2 for each school, do they split the stipend, or they get that each?
No, one's the boys coach, one's the girls coach.
So, yeah, but I
So
mean,
they each get
they
one.
each get, okay.
Correct, yeah.
All right.
But they don't have assistant coaches or
Right.
anything like that, so it's just them.
I didn't hear you just say this, but you may have, the speech and language pathologists, what are those stipends for?
Those are contractual stipends that were phased out, so people hired after a certain date don't get them, but
Oh,
there's
okay.
still a few people
All right.
who get them.
Mr. Hagedorn?
I had one question on cafeteria supervision, the lunch aides. A lot of terminations, was that something happened that there was a big changeover?
No, that's fairly typical in the summer for principals to post their lunch aides and kind of regroup and
Oh, I was just wondering, 'cause
ask
there was a
some
lot
back
of them
and not
listed,
ask
like, wow.
all of them back.
A lot of changes there.
Yeah, exactly. And we also had reduced the number of, we had to look at the numbers of students in each school and give them a maximum number of lunch aides that they could have.
Oh, okay,
because,
gotcha. All right.
You know, we never really regrouped after the reconfiguration and then the reconfiguration back, and we had to get a better handle.
Yeah, no problem, it just,
No, it's a good
that's
question.
out of the normal.
Good question.
Of how many?
It was a very small amount of money, but we reduced, if you recall, we had to reduce in certain accounts based upon the Board of Aldermen's recommendation for the budget. It was a small amount, but it was an amount that had to be taken out of hourly aides.
Yep.
And so that was part of the rationale for
Okay, that makes
reducing
sense.
some
I
of the
was just-
cafeteria
I
aides.
saw so many on there, it was just like, wow, we do a lot.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Thank you.
And the last report is the disbursement report.
Thank you. You have in your package the listing of all of the payments that were made in $1,500 or more for the month of August. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Ms. Krasinski?
Just one question. The very first item, we're paying to the city use of building fees for lawn and flooring. I'm just curious what that's for.
Yes, we, by law, when we take in rental fees for any of our facilities, that goes to the city. So we take the fees in, and then we have to pay them to the city.
So that's what that was.
Yes, and there's a revenue item in the city budget for use, school rental fees.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Very good. That completes your report, Dr. Teaser.
Yes,
Anything else?
thank you.
All right, we move on to consent agenda. Mr. Weiss?
Okay, I have a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items, consideration of minutes from August 28th, 2017 for the next meeting.
Your second?
Second.
Federico has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We had no new business or any board comment tonight? Dr. Gregory?
I just wanted to say how adorable I thought the little signs were that were placed on the lawns of families that had entering kindergartners. I thought that was adorable.
I think a lot of the PTAs, PTOs do that. It is a nice idea.
Super cute.
Any other comments? I have myself personally heard lots of nice comments about the opening of school, about the condition of the buildings, about some of our programs that people are just, people commented to me over the summer about programs last year that their kids were involved with. So, lots of, positive feedback. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Eight, 7 minutes.
So, you're saying you're supposed to next year,
Good night.